12:45 according to this computer. So I forgot to tell you in my haste earlier today too, everybody, we had a couple of special guests that kind of came in from the East Coast. I'm part of a AASHTO technical council on right of way engineering, and so the chair of that, Genevieve Hollier, which is from the Delaware Department of Transportation, was listening in, and a couple other people from that group. Looks like maybe Utah, maybe Arizona, Wisconsin, maybe Washington, Tennessee. So there may have been a couple of special guests who were kind of listening in. They're putting together or working on an AASHTO right-of-way engineering training possible platform. So they wanted to kind of see different states and what's going on. And so I invited them to kind of check in as they wanted to. So anyways, I don't know if they'll be back this afternoon. They're probably about time to get off work. So, but anyways, just so there was other people listening in. Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I'm glad to put it on. I hope it's helpful. And by the time you're done with this, you'll be tired of listening to me. But we'll get this all put together. And if you need to, people need to dig back in and look at things. Even as much as I do it, I still get into the manual constantly to look up stuff. It's there's just a lot there, and I hope that it's been good for project leaders and designers and all those that we work with too, because I think the more that we know about what each other's doing and the processes, then we're more understanding as to the needs and how to communicate with each other. And when we communicate with each other, we know what we're semi talking about. It's not to make everyone an expert at right-of-way engineering or surveying, but I think the more that we know, the more we understand it. So I would love to see something from maybe roadway or something like this too, that would help us understand the processes you have to go through, or, even project leaders, what is your roadmap? What are some of the hills and the valleys that you go through that we don't understand? So I think it makes us a better team player if we understand enough that we can communicate with each other. So, all right, with that, I will continue. This presentation, I adjusted a little bit. I actually was asked by Chase. Oh shoot, now I lost his name. He is he's running the bunch of the classes at Oregon State University in engineering. And he asked if I could put on a presentation for their capstone engineering class last month. So I put this together, and so I just did a few modifications and cleaned up a few things that were a little bit different. But so here's easements from an ODOT perspective and why we do what we do with them. So first off, we ask, what's an easement? It's a right that's held by one person to make use of the land than another one of another person with a limited interest, and that's a Black's Law Dictionary. One way we like to talk about it is when you have, fee title, you have the whole bundle of sticks. And an easement basically is saying that you take one of those sticks and you say, here, I'll give you one of my sticks from my bundle, but I still have the rest of the bundle. So it's a limited part of that whole that we have, and it has limitations based on verbiage that is into whatever document or deed that transfers that easement. So ODOT, the right-of-way department, they're the main holders of the approved easement list. I'm the co-holder on it, since we write the descriptions. And as you see, there's a title page. It was originally put together in 2005. Down at the bottom, you can see that now this one is a revised document that has, versions and everything else. Its final revision was, or last revision was in 2019. So ultimately, easements, both temporary and permanent, they're specific to their use and cannot be utilized for a purpose other than what is specified. So an easement area purchased to construct and maintain a roadway slope cannot be used to place a drainage facility or a sidewalk. So thus, all intended uses of the easement must be specified. If multiple uses are intended to occupy the same acquisition area, the easement's titles may be, if approved, combined into one parcel description. However, this is very limited. Combining easements should not be done without careful consideration of what the results would be. If an easement is needed at a specific location, such as a sign or a traffic control facility, and it falls within a larger easement, such as, say, slopes, then it's best to separate the two into separate parcels, not combine them. Combining the easements encumbers the area with all the listed uses at a higher value for the acquisition. So also avoid attempting to combine easements that have similar uses. For example, most easements include access over and across the area, so it is not necessary to combine access easement with another easement that allows access. Otherwise, we would have, if we've got an easement to construct a slope, that means we have access to construct the slope. Now, it doesn't mean that we have access to detour people, but it does mean we have access, because how can we build the slope if we can't get to it? So access is, for that purpose, is there, okay? So a writer shall, can contact Right of Way headquarters, Right of Way Engineering Group, Geometronics, advised on combining easements. With the exception of slopes and utilities, this was approved and done many years ago because quite up until just recently, FHWA would not participate in funds to relocate utilities specifically, just by themselves. So slopes was included so that we could work it in so that FHWA would participate. So it's still an approved easement and an approved combination. So easements may be combined without, these easements can be combined without prior approval because that is a title of one. Temporary easements are limited and specific to a period of time and automatically extinguish at the end of that period. All temporary easement titles in the description shall include the phrase 3 years or duration of the project, whichever is sooner. Now, the phrase gives a maximum time period of 3 years while allowing the easement to extinguish in the period during project, if the project duration is less than the easement is no longer needed, and the easement is no longer needed. So if it's known that the duration of the project will be longer than 3 years, then this maximum time period can be lengthened. But check with region, check with headquarters first, but I have seen them up to 5 years or more. However, the longer that the easement is in effect, the greater the value of that appraised value for the easement will be. And they do some prorations and stuff in there on different things. So just realize that the cost will get higher. Temporary and permanent easements can never be combined together, and they're always written as separate parcels. So the easement types approved for use in ODOT descriptions and deeds, they're grouped into categories. We have roadway, access, structural, traffic, utility, riparian, and hazardous materials. Each category contains both permanent and temporaries. Some easements may be acquired as both permanent or temporary and are noted as such. And the specific easement title is shown in bold text. Below the title are listed the allowable uses of the easement, followed by qualifying information. So these easements cover most all uses that would be required for a typical project, and every attempt should be made to utilize the easements on the approved list. The approved easement list in the right-of-way engineering manual contains the approved uses for each easement, and under no circumstances should a writer modify an easement title by either adding to or deleting from its title. The easements have the Department of Justice approval, and if the easement title is modified except as specified above, it will be rejected by the right-of-way engineering headquarters or right-of-way headquarters, and it'll come back to the writer and for a revision and possibly delay the project. And this is not negotiable. So if there is some special thing, it needs to be done way ahead of time because it has to go through DOJ. We've got to get the approval for the language, and there has to be a boilerplate, and it has to be accepted. So, if any easement required that doesn't appear on the list, you got to submit the title, the reasoning, and go through for permission and venti by the DOJ. So the reasoning for this, it's specific because of the boilerplate language. It has all the verbiage, all the writing in there specific to that title that covers ODOT, and also the Department of Justice knows the language, they know what they're defending, they know what we're trying to get, and it becomes consistent and it becomes defendable if condemnation happens or a lawsuit. So condemnation, what's condemnation? So it's the taking of private property for public use through the government's power of eminent domain. So if we go out, we lay everything out, we say we've got the project, we go to the homeowner, landowner, and say we need to get this property for this project, it's for the benefit of the public, yada, yada. And then they say, nope, talk to my lawyer. I ain't doing it. So when they do that, then negotiations, they try, to do it out of court, what we can, but there is state law, there is federal laws that we can condemn for the public benefit. Doesn't mean we automatically get it. We don't get it for free. Any of those things. It's appraised value, it's damages, it's all those things. And it can be a lengthy process. If you get into projects, you may run into where you can work everywhere but here because this is a holdout. So you can't touch this property at all to do the project yet. So this is just a copy of just kind of a front page of a little deal of, what a circuit court case title, looks like for condemnation. So, and at all costs, right-of-way agents, everybody tries to avoid condemnation. They don't want to go there. It ends up costing us more money. It's, it's just not good if we don't have to. So, as we talked about, both easements, temporary, permanent, have a specific use. That's just, they're specific. And the reason why ODOT has broken them down and got them so specific in certain areas is because of value. I mean, an impact, with the landowners. Easements don't take away from the overall square footage of property like fee does. It can be specific to use because we don't need to, necessarily buy fee just to put a slope or something. And if it's the difference between having to buy the person out because they have an uneconomic remainder versus just buying an easement, we'll go with an easement if that's what we need it for. Especially if it if it's not something that's under the roadway in itself. Though we do have the very first permanent easement, and which we call the fee of all easements, is permanent easement for highway right-of-way purposes. And this basically is pretty much the whole bundle of sticks except for a couple, which is the underlying fee. The landowner basically can't do anything with that property, but yet it remains part of their square footage as a fee owner. Some jurisdictions look at it differently, but essentially it's all the rights. Now, when we're doing projects, and you should always check where we have a local agency, city, a county, something like that, many of their charters and other things don't like to have fee. And so permanent easement for highway right-of-way purposes is acquired if we're acquired in our names, if we're going to transfer or give it to a city or a county, because they would prefer having a permanent easement for highway right-of-way purposes. So if you have the opportunity on a larger project and you're working with a LPU that's potentially going to get the property, you may want to separate your mainline stuff on the highway that is fee and your sideline stuff that may go to the county or the city into permanent easement. So always check with that. We talked about the specific areas, signs, smaller one inside of others. It drives the costs up, it encumbers the property. So, try to think of land values, try to think of purpose, longevity, those sort of things. But easements are heavily used in our day-to-day work. So roadway easements, we're talking about the permanent ones. We've got highway right-of-way purposes, and then you can see allowed uses. There's some notes there. Permanent easement for slopes, kind of gives a brief explanation. Sidewalk slide correction. A brand new one that just came in, part of this revision, was for subsurface soil stabilization. I tried to get them to just use slide correction, but they thought that was too scary. So they came up with this new one, had to run it through DOJ, got it in there. It has basically the same terminologies as slide correction, but it doesn't say slide in it anywhere. So that was the word that no one liked, was slide. So you can see how specific some of this stuff can get. Clear zone, which is site distance, clear zone safety, brush, trees, things that people could run into and hurt themselves. So as we continue to move on, site distance is another one, which basically it's when you pull up to an intersection and someone's got a big advertisement sign right there and you can't see around it, or a tree or some of those things like that. This is one where we can buy an easement just to remove those obstacles for site distance, and the owner retains the property, but they can't put anything there, to diminish that site distance. Another one that has gotten real big with bike paths and bus facilities, different things, is bicycle pedestrian facilities. So specific to use. And those are the permanent roadway easements. So then we'll move into temporary easements. So we call it the TE, or temporary easement for work area. Now I call that the fee of temporary easements. The reason why I say the fee of temporary easements is because look at its allowed its allowed use. Construction purposes during the project. It doesn't say what those are, but what it specifies is pretty much anything you need to do during construction that's related to construction, you can do within that temporary easement. You can park vehicles, you could stage stuff, you could detour, you can build, you can, as long as it goes back to as good or better than its original state. I think something is kind of like that in the verbiage. But this is the most expensive temporary easement because it has all those rights, whatever you need to do for construction. We got in a discussion about detouring pedestrians through a work area easement. I said, well, is detouring the pedestrians part of the work? Yes. But why would you want to detour them through a work area? Well, nothing says that any work is going to be going on there right at the moment. Potentially, you're going to detour the pedestrians into that area while you're working in the other area. Then you're going to move the pedestrians to the other area while you work in that area. So if you need to do anything other than a single specific thing, anything related to construction that you can think of, if you need to, do it as a work area, because then it's up to the designers to construction to keep the pedestrians safe in the work area. It's not up to us to write it that way. Now, if the only thing you're going to do in an area and you have the room is to deter pedestrians for, say, ADA and these others, then you need to do the detour. And it allows you to construct, do whatever, as long as you put it back. But you cannot do anything else in that other than detour pedestrians, or if it's a big, say, vehicles where you're going to build a road and take it back out. But that is specific, only thing you can do in it. So in these really super tight areas, a lot of times the work area easement is better because you can stage and move pedestrians and work back and forth inside of active right-of-way to temporary easement, especially if we don't need it in the future. So it's up to construction, it's up to designers of how that works. But essentially I told them if we try to pull that out or separate or say we can't do that, we're going to tie construction's hands and they won't be happy because construction still needs to build the project. So there's my spiel, sorry. Temporary easement for slopes. I mean, I think that's where you're going to build a slope temporarily and then take it back out. I haven't seen it used much. Fill material, a temporary easement, if you're going to move a bunch of material and stack it somewhere, then get rid of it, put it back. Here's your detour. It can be limited to pedestrians only. Doesn't have to be. Now we've got two here that are essentially similar. Original one we had was a temporary easement for road approach. And well, just legal system and people's interpretation said, well, it's a driveway, it's not a road. So they got in a battle, a debate, and so they created a new one that is for driveway road approach. We didn't do away with the other one, and they call it a driveway road approach reconnection. This came about from DOJ also. We used to only do, we just did it as work area, but then someone said, well, we want more money because you could go park a D8 cat there, or you could stage material there. And DOJ said, yeah, you're right. So let's narrow this gap down and let's define it better. So now when we're doing driveway approaches and we need easements to reconnect them, you have temporary easement for driveway road approach. That's what you would use. The other road approach temporary easement might be maybe a large private road or a county road or something, you know, that we need to get separate. Anyways, so use this one mostly. The other one might be kind of outdated now. Building demolition, if you're on a big project, a new project, and they need to demo a building because it's into the new alignment or something. One thing though to note on that one that got somebody on one is new alignment, did a building demo. It touched the new right of way, but didn't, when they were ready to demo the building, there was no road there on the new alignment. So there was no access to that building demolition site other than through the rest of the person's property. So make sure you can, get to these sites if that's there. Temporary easement for turbidity monitoring. This is a new one that came up also. For many years, they did culvert bridge projects. They required turbidity monitoring upstream and downstream, but many of these streams or smaller ones were privately owned because they own to the middle of the stream or they own across it. We probably for years trespassed because we never purchased any easement to go upstream or downstream to do that monitoring. So there's a new one for upstream and downstream of a culvert or bridge project for turbidity monitoring. So, okay, access easements. So again, specific, but one thing that permanent easement for access road, I was told, and this is, I don't remember who it was, DOJ, someone, anyways. If ODOT, as the highway department or a public entity, gets a permanent easement for an access road, that access road now becomes public. And it says right there, once this is done, it becomes a public road. So if the owner does not want that to be a publicly accessed road and only limited to ODOT or specific, then you need to go with permanent easement for access. The only difference is that it doesn't become public, but also you don't have any construction or maintenance rights with the access. Essentially, whether this be temporary or permanent, a direct access easement doesn't give you the ability to construct anything for people to access or cross and then remove it. It just means you say I can go from here to there across your property, and I can't maintain it, I can't construct, I can't do anything else. So it is very limited, and it's not public, it's restricted. So make sure if you're ever doing access stuff to look at those. Okay. Ingress egress can be another one similar to access. It just gives the right to go in and out across another person's property. So okay, and then temporary easement, kind of the same thing. It's the same as the upper, but it's only for a limited time for during a construction period or something like that of access. So same thing, temporary easement for access. Structural easements. Sorry, getting a little croaky. All right. So again, very specific. Permanent easement for type or wall. So be specific. Is it a sound wall? Is it retaining wall, privacy wall? Those sort of things. That just helps specify its use. Permanent easement for retaining wall supports. So these are like tiebacks that go back, into someone else's property or into the hill or whatever. So you get a permanent easement that protects those so that they can't go in and dig or drill or anything that would, hurt those. Permanent easement for wall maintenance. So we'll do this one. Sometimes we put the wall kind of right on the line or close to it, and we at some future time need 5 feet or 10 feet behind it to maintain it. We'll purchase a permanent easement for maintenance. This is a new one that came from Region 5 because they get snow over there. So And so they modified the wall one and did one for snow fence and for snow fence maintenance. Kind of the same reasoning. Then we move into permanent easement for bridge facilities, bridge maintenance. So many of these come up with, you know, some Department of State lands, other issues where we don't actually have the underlying fee to an area. So a lot of the state lands, when though we try to get a permanent easement for highway right-of-way purposes from them. So that way we have all the rights we need to. Bridge maintenance, kind of the same thing. If if it's a real tight area, then we'll do a bridge maintenance easement. Just allows maintenance to get to the bridge to maintain it. Sign bridge, the big metal sign bridges over freeways and highways and stuff. It's a easement for that. Guardrail facilities, if we need to turn a guardrail and crank it into someone's property, and that's the only thing we need. Riprap and revetment. I knew what riprap was, but I didn't know what revetment was originally. So revetment has to do with stopping erosion, basically. So these are an easement, say at the bottom of a, you know, like a jetty or a down into a creek or something to stop erosion. So that's a permanent easement for that. I've not done one for an interpretive sign facility, but it's specific. So if you need it. And then also the snow fence, there's a temporary one, which I guess if it's a bad year and they need to go through out a temporary one to help drifting somewhere. So, okay, traffic and utility easements. Again, very specific. Permanent easement for traffic control facility, and that's for signal poles, you know, beacons, you know, all the different things, whatever traffic control needs. There's a permanent easement that's specific to that use. Again, it minimizes the impact, minimizes the appraisal, minimizes all those things, and it can be just large enough for what's needed. Same way with a sign, and same way with illumination facilities. Okay, another utilities. Here's the permanent easement for water, gas, electrical, communication services, lines, fixtures, and facilities. The one everybody loves to write out. This one tries to cover all the basic public or standard utilities that run typically together. And so it tries to be non-exclusive. So that's why it can be water, it could be gas, could be electric, could be communication. It could be all of those or one, but it's not separating. And so we had one where someone said, well, we don't want gas in there. Well, I'm sorry, but gas is part of it. And so we have to leave it in there. If you don't want gas running there, then tell gas to move somewhere else and have another easement. But its title is inclusive and its boilerplate is complete. So do not add or change, please. Okay. Overhead is just that. If all this stuff is not underground, so this one here, the upper one, sorry, can be underground, overhead. It's under, over, either way. If all we need to do is move a power pole that has communication or power on it, and we need to move it 5 feet, do the overhead one. So, because then all we're doing is the overhead and the line. It's less intrusive, not as expensive. Utility pole. Sorry, essentially that's like a guy anchor pole. You know, it's hanging out there. Need a separate one for that. And these also can be temporaries too. Sorry, if it needs to be temporary, so you're moving it out of the way by construction, but then it's going to get moved back into another place. these can also be done as temporaries. Oh, utility pole, anchor pole, okay. Yeah, I forgot there was a separate one there. Irrigation facilities, I've never done this one, but it had a use or someone needed it one time, possibly in some urban areas or cities or something to get some water or different things for landscaping. Some landscape easements. I don't know why you'd have a temporary one, but it could happen, I guess. Drainage facility, that one gets used a lot more now with water quality and displacing. So it's permanent to, and it could be temporary, I think also, if you need something just as it's being shifted or modified. So again, specific to use. And so you noticed up above, sewer or sanitary lines weren't included. So typically your sewer or sanitary has a 10-foot separation from any water, gas, electrical, anything anyways. So sewer has its own one, or sanitary or storm, I guess, because they're going to be quite a ways away from the other utilities anyways. So that's why they're separated by themselves, in my opinion, I should say. I don't know about
that. So how would we apply these easements from the approved easement list if it's state policy that we can't spend highway fund dollars on easements for public utilities?
Okay, so it's not really just state, it's FHWA, it was federal highways. And it was interpretations and discussions about that. But if the relocation, so if they're, we're not paying them to move their utilities if they're in our right of way by permit, okay? They have to relocate that on their own dime based on the agreement that they signed when we gave them the opportunity to be there. What the difference was saying that we can't specifically buy an easement in order for them to relocate to. And was that adequate, or could we do that? The consensus, I believe, from what I understand, has changed and said, yes, we will support as part of the highway fund money that we can purchase the easement area for them to move to, because of the road itself, we're shoving them out of the way and they can't stay where they're at. So that way we're still in control basically, and they're still there under our permit. We just gave them a new location to go to. Does that answer the question, hopefully, Tyler?
An add-on to that was that his understanding is that we can't purchase an or a public utility that ODOT is requiring to locate.
So there is some caveats in there. That's more of a right-of-way question, like Kat or someone would have the answer to more than I do. But that's typically why we had it attached to slopes, and we usually keep it attached to slopes still. But there's some verbiage and there's some reasoning and some conditions that are different. And I'm not sure of exactly what those are. Yeah, so hopefully maybe Tyler can reach out to Kat Hallpenny or one of the right-of-way leads that maybe could give them more of a up-to-date of what that is and how that works.
Great. And we actually have another question if you have time.
Okay.
Are the scenarios where the areas calculated for temporary easement types would overlap? Are there any scenarios where they would?
Yes, that's a good question. And I think I get into that, but I'll answer that. So just in Joe, in your scenario there, if you have a temporary easement for work area, and then outside of that you have an access easement, the access easement would not overlap the work area easement because the work area easement covers all of that. So those two would not overlap. Now, if you had a slope easement, utility easement, something that's specific to a use, then yes, you would want to overlap your access easement over that, because those are specific for that purpose. They're not for detour. Does that make sense? Hopefully. Oh. Yeah, you could, sorry, Tyler. So you're region 4, right? So maybe Dave Brown, or I'm trying to think of who the lead. Kat Halpenny is the right-of-way manager in region 1, Tyler. So any of your lead ODOT senior agents could be able to help you with that. No problem. I understand, Tyler. Okay. So basically, as we continue with these, you can see the specifics and you get the gist of why the specifics are there. And kind of like we were talking, overlapping easements. So overlapping easements is I have this one use and it's specific. And if I need to have another use cross that easement, then they need to overlap and you specify how much area is inside of the other one. So like I say, that's why work area, I call it the fee of temporary, because you can do what you need to for construction. But if you're going to do just an access and it butts up or comes across another permanent easement, like or temporary, it's going to have to cross or overlap in order so that the two uses can both be done in the same area, though it's a small area. Kind of like a sign getting put inside of a slope easement or something like that. You don't want to encumber the whole thing with a sign easement for the same area as a slope. You only want it for that specific small area. So anyways, these keep going for specifics: temporary, illumination, irrigation, drainage, ditch, all that good stuff. Then there is conservation and riparian type easements, which we get into, floodplain enhancements, water flow, which is kind of a flood or flash, type of thing, wetland mitigations, channel change, which you'll see on a lot of old maps. Don't know that we get into much channel change anymore because it's, I think, a bag of tricks we probably don't want to open with all the waterway, all the different stuff, fish passage, wildlife, vegetation, habitat conservation, and then we end with hazardous materials, and that's for like cleaning up old oil tanks or spills or getting around service stations and that sort of stuff. So that's the total of our list and how it comes together. And you see why it's so specific and why ODOT is so strict on that is because when we get into it and our document specialists and everyone else is putting these together, this verbiage over here, in which they will not even let me have a boilerplate copy. They're like, nope, that's protected. So I had to go get like a filled out one and kind of just cover up as much as I could, because it has basically fill in areas. It says put this here, put that there, and they punch those things into that, and the rest of the stuff they do not touch, because that was DOJ vetted. And if we changed it, they went to court, or you had a smart lawyer or something said, well, look, something's been changed here. We'll get you on this, you know. That's what they don't want. So with the amount of purchases of easements, fee, all these things that ODOT acquires every year on all these things, they have to have it as smooth as possible and as repetitious or complete so that it doesn't. You see all the understands and this and that's and grantors and grantees. And so this has all gone through Department of Justice and is the way that it is. And in there, then in the end, they add and attach our Exhibit A, legal descriptions to it with all of our stuff, and they point to that. And so that's what a kind of a final deed would look like. This is a sketch map. I put this in here for them to look at. This isn't part of the deed. You see my active drawing up there. This was just for the class, so I didn't get it pulled back out. And then a little statistic that I talked to Right of Way headquarters, and they were actually able to spit me out a report from Ritz, which I thought was pretty good. So in 2020, for the year 2020, these are the totals of easements that ODOT acquired just in 2020. So 979 permanent easements and 1,500 temporary easements. So for a total of 2,500 easements in 1 year that we acquired. That was before ADA kicked up. So due to the ADA deal, they can expect the next few years to possibly even double that number, if not more. That's a lot of easements to go through, a lot of people in a short period of time. So, and if you have any questions, again, you can contact us. And this was just another example of temporary easement. Here's a sign easement that's inside of, outside a little bit of fee over the top of some slopes and water and electrical. And so just another little example of how some of that kind of goes together. So, all right.